guys. Is that okay?
Yes.
On Friday evenings, I used to come home from school to the smell of shuro cooking on the stove. My mother, standing at the counter, in her long flowing orange dress she wore just to cook 15 spices, the smell of Ethiopia in the air. To me, this was home. My grandmother would send packets of mitmita and berbere with whatever distant relative or family member was traveling between countries, and every time we would call and tell her we already had plenty. But we were too far and her heart was too full, and this was her only release, so she continued to send more and more. Continued to seal her love into plastic packages with the heat of a candle, and this was how we loved across 2 continents in the Atlantic. In the 5th grade, we had to present about our favorite foods. So I took my mother's recipe for dorowet and stood up in front of the entire class for 6 minutes, breaking down my childhood with oceans of pride flowing from my tongue. This would be one of the only times in my life that I would stand up in front of Americans and say Amharic words with a steady voice. Later that day, a white boy came up to tell me that it had sounded disgusting 5 years after that. I am sitting and nearby somebody is pointedly raving about their new favorite Ethiopian spot while I am pointedly ignoring them when another white boy spits out, "That shit is repulsive." Honestly, dude, it makes me want to throw up. And decade and a half of screaming memories threatened to spill out of my tongue and clamp around his throat 3 years before that. My best friend turns to me to say, "I didn't even know Ethiopian food was a thing. You know, aren't they all starving?" Bursts into laughter a moment later, and I am reminded that behind every white savior facade is the knowledge that black famine is of no real consequence to you. That black hunger is noble tragedy at best and comedy at worst. February 7th, 2017. Betsy DeVos is sworn in as the United States Secretary of Education. 16 days later, she gets up on a stage and asserts her pride in telling Bernie Sanders there is no such thing as a free lunch. The very next morning, 2.2 million American teachers watch as hungry American students walk into their classrooms. Betsy chuckles when she says this, smiles so wide you can see the graveyard in her mouth, unhinges her mouth so you can see the bones still stuck in her teeth, glows with the pride of a hunter who still has a full clip left. Before the year is up, Betsy and the administration behind her will target undocumented students, food stamps, free school lunch programs, and the question becomes, what is it about watching hungry children starve that pleases this billionaire white woman so much? 1 in 4 black families struggle with food security, and ain't starvation the blackest way to die? With your own body betraying you, when you didn't have to go, with those who could have saved you turning the other cheek. And this makes me think that perhaps hunger is the most silent American disease, because when was the last time a black boy who starved to death got a hashtag, got a poem, got to live on forever in the forefront of Twitter's mind? But he is still dead, all the same. Thank you.